Hey, today on I Follow for Kids, we are looking at the word I serve. And like we've been saying, when we follow Jesus, it is an adventure. We don't stay in one place, we go on the greatest adventure of our lives. And today we are going someplace that I think is out of this world. Let's check it out. Well, did you guess that we were headed to the Kansas Cosmosphere? We are here, and it was out of this world. It's really fun to check out all the exhibits they have and all the information they have about how we have sent a lot of things, especially rockets, to space. It's pretty cool. But here's the thing, what does that have to do with our word today? I serve. Now remember, we have said that following Jesus isn't just, it's an adventure. It's not something we do one time. It's an adventure that we go on. Following Jesus is the greatest adventure of our lives. You know what's really cool? Probably the most impressive thing to me in the Cosmosphere is the Saturn V rocket. The Saturn V rocket, if you didn't know, was the rocket that actually got man to the moon. It was an amazing mission, the Apollo 14 mission, and the men went up on this gigantic rocket. The rocket was 60 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty is. I mean, imagine how huge this thing was. But it launched into the air and it used up a whole ton of fuel, and one by one these engine pieces fell off. Isn't that interesting? All the time, all the effort, all the investment into the rocket, and the rocket didn't actually make it all the way to the moon or even to space. I mean, it had to fire all of that energy, all of that rocket fuel, and then it detached from the command module and the lunar module that would be jettisoned on to the moon. It would land there and get men on the moon. Isn't that interesting? And what's really cool is actually not even the part that made it to the moon would be the part that eventually made it back. In fact, the lunar module, the thing that allowed the astronauts to actually go down and get on the surface of the moon, once they were back in the command module, that lunar module was left as well. In fact, it was the command module that was most important. It had a heat shield on it that would allow these people, they'd saved it, it would allow the astronauts to come back to Earth through the atmosphere, through the intense heat, and a parachute would go off, and they would land safely back on Earth. I mean, think about that, how each part of the rocket had a specific part, a specific purpose to help it out. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? But what does that have to do with I serve? Well, when I think about I serve, I think about Jesus, because Jesus modeled service. In fact, in the book of John, chapter 13, we see Jesus model service for his disciples. He gets down and he washes the disciples' feet. I mean, amazing. This is the guy that should be lifted up. This was the Son of God. This was the most important person on the planet. And yet he sat down and he got down on his knees and he washed each one of his disciples' feet. That's pretty cool. That's amazing. Isn't it amazing that by making himself less, he elevated what he was about? He was here to serve and love us so that we could follow him by believing in him. See, I think that is what the Christian life is all about. Sometimes we feel like the engine of the rocket. We've got tons of energy, we've got tons of talent, we've got tons of ability, but what if instead of using that for ourselves, we gave that as something to help lift up Jesus and to lift up others? Might not mean that we get the spotlight. It might not mean we make it to the moon like the command module did. But just think about that rocket. That rocket needed those engines that would eventually detach off. It needed it for it to reach new heights. Even though the engine didn't make it all the way to space, it needed it to serve it. And that's the way the church is designed. We are meant to serve others. We're meant to put others before us. We are meant to even sacrifice some things on our part. You know, if you read the book of Acts, which I really encourage you to do, there are so many stories of the early church doing this. They knew what it meant to model service. In fact, sometimes they would give up their own things and give it to someone else simply because they needed it. It wasn't all about lifting them up. Sometimes it was about lifting up others, and most of all, it was about lifting up Jesus. Now, here's the thing. This doesn't mean that you need to go sell everything you have and give the money to someone else. I'm not necessarily saying that. In fact, one of the ways that we like to look at it is having some that you give, some that you save, and some that you spend. Now, a lot of times we might think of give, save, spend in the terms of money, and that's not bad. My family does this. We have some money that we give to the church at the very first. That's called tithing. And we have some money that we save for a future day, and then we have some money that we spend on doing fun things like going to the Cosmosphere. But here's the thing. You can do that not just with money, you can do it with time too. Imagine if you said, hey, I'm going to serve. I'm going to give some of my time up. Just like the engine on that rocket, I am going to sacrifice some things. I might have to leave behind some things, but it's about lifting up Jesus. And then you said, hey, I want to spend some time doing things that I love to do. It's kind of like the lunar module, the command module that made it to the moon. You do the stuff that you enjoy doing. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you said, hey, I'm also going to save some time. Well, what does it mean to save time? I'm not necessarily talking about saving minutes back for something later. What I mean is sometimes you purposely spend time as an investment. Remember the heat shield on the rocket? That was a very important part that would come into play much later in the Apollo 14 mission. Help them get back safely. And sometimes for us, it's good to say, hey, I'm going to go to bed early. I'm going to save some of my time for sleep because I need my rest. Or one of the things that we talk about when we follow Jesus is something called the Sabbath. So what does a Sabbath mean? Well, it just means that sometimes we're going to spend our time in a way that helps us focus on Jesus. You know, it's called a Sabbath because we spend some time with God, we read our Bibles, we listen to the Holy Spirit. It just gives us time to recharge. And it's not so much doing something, and it's not always serving, but we do spend some time saving our time so that we can recharge and do those other things that we love to do. Now, I don't know if that's helpful to think about your time like that, but I think at the end of the day, if we want to follow Jesus, it means we're going to go some exciting places. But to do that well, we have to first do what Jesus did, and that is to serve.